We're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup podcast here on the Cover One YouTube channel, or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your co-host, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week by Rob Quinn, Cover One features writer. And today we are going to be discussing our takeaways from the Buffalo Bills Week 2 dismantling of the Miami Dolphins. It was... In hindsight, it was a good game, but during the game, I think we can all agree that it was frustrating at times, frustrating more than it was exciting, at least when one side of the field or one side of the ball was on the field. It was pretty frustrating, but we'll get into all of this. Again, we'll discuss our takeaways, what went right, what went wrong, maybe a little bit of a Washington football team preview, and then some hot takes to get you out of here. So I think that was the shortest intro I've ever done. That was the most concise and to-the-point intro I've ever done. And I remember to introduce us. I am proud of us growing as a host here, growing as a channel, as a podcast, as a show. And again, I am joined today by Rob. Rob, how was your weekend?
It was good. I was up in Philly for my girlfriend's sister's wedding, so that was fun. Got to explore, got caught in traffic on the way to the airport yesterday thanks to the Eagles game. But overall, it was a good weekend, capped off by an awesome wedding night and a Buffalo Bills win. So I'm excited to talk about it.
I was able to see some live football this weekend. Unfortunately, it was not Buffalo Bills. It was even better. It was the Buffalo Bulls versus Coastal Carolina game. Saw some Maction X Fun Belt crossover. It was electric, Rob. UB did not win. The scoreboard was closer than it looked. But that Coastal Carolina offense, very fitting that it's fun in every week besides the week I see them live, and then they're just boring. But, you know, triple option, fun offense, but not nearly as fun as the Buffalo Bills offense, which we'll get into in a few moments here. But before we do that, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Rob, can you tell me a little bit about Underdog?
Yeah, so Underdog is like the newest up-and-coming fantasy sports app. I've been using it ever since we partnered with them. I hadn't heard of them before, but I'm glad that I did. You can use the promo code COVER1 to get a free $25 with a deposit of $25 now. They do weekly, daily fantasy. They do best ball drafts. They do pick'ems where you could play parlays with over-unders and all that fun stuff. I've been losing money weekly. I had a good week one of the preseason, and since then it's been all downhill from here. But yeah, use the code COVER1 and get a free $25 to try to make some money.
Again, that is promo code COVER1. So we will now get started with our actual Buffalo Bills coverage, talking points. We're going to start with everyone's favorite segment. I can't remember words today. We're in for a good show, Rob. Everyone's favorite segment, the Roundup. This, of course, is the segment where every week we look at the latest news, rumors, and stuff surrounding the Buffalo Bills, and we quickly gloss over it before we get into the real meat and potatoes, the fun stuff. It's the segment so nice we named it twice. All right. So this week, today, actually, according to Doug Kaiir of PFF, the Buffalo Bills are hosting free agent cornerback Quinton Dunbar on a visit. Now, I don't know about you, Rob, but I obviously knew who Quinton Dunbar was before this happened, and I knew him for being a good cornerback and not for doing that thing off the field with DeAndre Baker. I knew him because he's a good cornerback. So I didn't have to do this research, but I did it for the benefit of the podcast. Quinton Dunbar, of course, was undrafted in 2015, spent 2015 through 2019 with the Washington football team. He started in 2018 and 19, but got injured in both of those seasons. He's an outside corner. From what I've read, had a really good 2019. He allowed just 55.8% of the passes thrown at him, allowed just 2 touchdowns compared to 4 interceptions. That's a good ratio. But again, just can't stay on the field health-wise. Wasn't all that good in Seattle. I think he got injured last year too. Or he spent 2020 with Seattle. Probably should have said that off top. But from what I understand, his last 3 seasons have ended prematurely with an injury. But when he's on the field, he's pretty good. So, or at least good at times. He's shown flashes. So, Rob, what do you make of Quinton Dunbar coming in to visit and Levi Wallace on the hot seat here?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into really like the technical stuff of his game because honestly, I haven't watched him like that. I know he was a receiver at Florida, and like you said, spent those 4 seasons
Right, I knew
in
that.
Washington. Spent those 4 seasons in Washington, in Seattle, obviously. So he's really like a zone corner, and that's what Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier's defense need. But it's interesting that they're deciding to bring in a veteran cornerback at this stage for a workout. Now, Levi Wallace left the game yesterday. Obviously, it's not a serious injury. Dane Jackson came in, but they could use a little more depth there with the guys in the practice squad. Then they only really have Siran Neal as the only outside corner left behind those guys. So I think it's interesting that they're bringing a guy in at this stage and not during the offseason.
Right, it is interesting. It kind of reminds me, obviously not to the same scale, but in 2018, when everyone all offseason was like, the Bills should probably have a veteran quarterback on their roster. They probably shouldn't roll with Peterman, Allen, and McCarron. And then they didn't. They just never picked one up. And then they picked up Matt Barkley and Derek Anderson. Then at the end of the year, they were like, yeah, we probably should have had a veteran all along. Now it's like all offseason, actually for the past couple of off seasons, people were like, they probably should have another cornerback, and they just haven't done it. And now they're like, oh, yeah, we should probably get another cornerback. Again, who knows if this is actually going to happen. We will wait and talk about Quinton Dunbar in a more in-depth fashion if and when he signs, because it's kind of useless to just sit here and devote a large portion of the show, more than we already have, to talking about a player who isn't on the Bills. But as you said, it is interesting that now is the time that they choose to make the move. Levi Wallace didn't look great in week 1. I thought he bounced back last week or yesterday, had that interception after the taunting penalty, which I don't know if we'll get into, but that was funny. But it is interesting, and we will talk about him more in depth, about the player we both know well after if the signing is made. So getting into the actual game, our takeaways from the Buffalo Bills 35-0 win over the Miami Dolphins. It was, again, it's difficult to describe this game because everything looked good besides like one position for the most part. And that's the position that we all want to look good. That's the position we all expect to look good. So we will get into that later in the show. But we're going to talk about a lot of positives. We had some people last week say that we were too negative. This isn't going to be one of those shows because, again, it was a 35-0 win. I think there are more positives coming out of this game than there are negatives. So, Rob, I will let you start. What is your first takeaway from this Buffalo Bills week 2 win?
So obviously the first takeaway has to come with what we saw in the first and second and really every subsequent drive in the game, and that's the defensive line. Young defensive ends in particular, really stepping up and dominating that game. AJ Epinesa leading with 8 or 9 pressures. He was a force. And we saw this all through the preseason where he did not show up on a stat sheet, but he was dominant. And his pressures directly led to sacks from the other players. The Bills finished with 6 sacks. And I believe 3 of them were a direct result of Epinesa's pressures, most notably the Justin Zimmer one. And Epinesa just looked like a beast. He was explosive. He was winning off the edge, outside shoulder, inside moves, speed to power, just every which way. He knocked Tua out of the game on that incredible hit. And then you look at Greg Rousseau, the rookie, and he finished with 5 tackles, 2 sacks, and he lucked into one of those sacks. You could
they
say
were cleanup sacks. It doesn't count.
Yeah, right. But those are the things you expect out of a rookie with that size and length, and he's going to be there to clean that up using his length and stuff. So it was a very encouraging day all around by the defensive line, and I'm really excited to see AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau moving forward.
Yes, Rousseau, according to PFF, or Rousseau, sorry, Greg, if you're listening. He had 8 pressures compared to Epinesa's 9, which I believe the Bills tweeted out. So that's a very good day from the Bills' 2 young defensive ends that we talked about a lot heading into this season. There really isn't much other to say about them other than they were great. Epinesa, you brought up his pressures leading to sacks. I think his pressure had a big role in the Levi Wallace interception. He really got in there. It was Brissett at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe I saw a clip of Epinesa generating some pressure on there, and Brissett had to get the ball out, got it to Levi Wallace. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I do believe Epinesa got another pressure on that play. It was just, as you said, just a very good performance, a very promising performance out of these two young defensive ends. And the defense in general, Rousseau even saw time in coverage at one point, not at numerous points, doing as part of unorthodox play calls, which I'll get into later in the show because I like those play calls. But it was on one of those plays where he dropped back into coverage where he got his first sack, which, of course, was a cleanup sack, which all the draft people told me before the draft, Rob, and I listened to them because I'm stupid. But they all told me that they're cleanup sacks. All of the sacks are cleanup sacks. And I don't know if you know this, cleanup sacks, not only do they not count, but they also don't see the defender taking the quarterback to the ground. So cleanup sacks are useless, and they serve no purpose. That, of course, is sarcasm. I don't care how Greg Rousseau gets his sacks. He's going to get his sacks. He's just too big and too talented of a guy to not make an impact on the game. And through these first two games, especially in week 2, he's making an impact. And AJ Epinesa, I mean, I've said it before, just his transformation through these last 2 years, especially this year, has been crazy. It's completely changing his game, completely changing his body type. Not the player the Bills drafted, probably not the player who he thought he was going to be when they drafted him. And if he is, that's wild. That's wild forecasting there. But either way, I think they're getting the best version of Epinesa, probably the best AJ Epinesa has been in his football career. Just a menace out there. So we have a good comment here. I'm curious why we're not seeing more Boogie. That's a good question. Do we think it's a numbers thing?
Well, number one, it's a numbers thing. And number two, obviously, throughout the preseason games that we saw, he did not look ready to really contribute in a meaningful fashion this year. And that's okay. We saw AJ Epinesa in the same role last year. He was inactive to start the season. They slowly brought him along and gave him a few snaps here and there. And he only finished the season, I believe, playing about 20% of the defensive snaps. So when you have the depth that the Buffalo Bills do along the defensive line, there's no reason to force him into the lineup. Like who are you going to remove to put Boogie Basham in? In a perfect world, you'd like to see your second round defensive end start and make an impact, but you already have Jerry Hughes, Epinesa, Rousseau, Addison, right, all these guys, and they're making an impact. It's not like there's anybody that's not pulling their weight along that defensive line. And F.A. Obata was inactive, and he's a talented player.
I think he was injured, though. I think he got hurt late in the week.
Yeah, but even so, I don't know if he would have been active for that game now that Zach Moss is back in the lineup. So it's really, this is just such a deep team that it's going to be a numbers thing. And I'm not discouraged by the fact that Basham did not suit up. You see what the defensive line did yesterday, 46 total pressures on defense. Brissett and Tua were pressured on 32 of their 53 dropbacks. Like, that's incredible. And for Boogie Basham to be on the sidelines watching that, he can only learn, develop, and get better for the future.
Right. And people are saying it in the comments, but it just speaks to the depth of the defensive line that, like you brought up, that your second round defensive end doesn't have to play. Like, he doesn't need a role. He can just sit on the sideline and the team is perfectly fine without it or without him. I mean, that's a good sign. That's a good sign for your depth. So should we stick on the defensive side of the ball for takeaways, or should we jump back to the offense quick?
We'll jump back.
We'll jump back to the offense because I think we're going to be talking a lot about the defense because it was fun to watch. I want to talk about the rushing attack. I would say that I wouldn't say that they committed to the run this week, but they committed to it more so than they did last week. Running backs combined for 23 carries this week, this compared to 15 last week. I mean, we really talked about the run game on the show last week, just how they didn't do it. Josh Allen threw the ball 51 times in a game where Devin Singletary looked good when they tried to get him going. They just didn't try to get him going consistently. This week they did, at least more so than last week, and I thought that both Devin Singletary and Zach Moss answered the call. I thought they looked great. Devin Singletary had 13 carries for 82 yards and 1 touchdown. Of course, that electric 46-yarder on the second play of the game, untouched to the end zone. Really nice. Zach Moss, 8 carries for 26 yards and 2 scores. Fumbled early, bounced back, and scored 2 just head down Zach Moss touchdowns. That's what they drafted Zach Moss for. That's why I picked Zach Moss up on the fantasy waiver wire this week. Who's smarter, me or Brandon Bean? I don't know. People are talking, but Zach Moss, just again, Sean McDermott's talked about him. You wrote an article about Zach Moss today, I believe. Just for him to not let that fumble affect him. I think Deion Dawkins said yesterday that Moss came back to the sideline after his fumble and just said, "Yep, okay, give it back to me. I got it," and he did. 2 touchdowns to end the game, He ended the game with 2 touchdowns. That last touchdown was wild. I mean, that's on Zach Moss's career highlights, and that's on whoever he ran over's career highlights. But again, ended the game with 143 rushing net yards. That's only like 20 something more than they finished with last week. But I do feel that they were more devoted to the run this week than they were last week. And it's nice to see that in a game where the offense sputtered at points, in a game where Josh Allen did struggle, we'll get into that. But in a game where Josh Allen struggled, the offense can still score 35 points. The offense can still focus on, deploy the running backs in a more significant role than they would usually, and the running backs will be able to answer the call. I thought Moss and Singletary, again, not an overt commitment to the run, but they kept the offense moving, and they look like a good duo, a well-diversified duo. Moss has got that power, that head-down north-south style of play, and Singletary's got the burst, got the agility. It's a well-rounded group, which I didn't really expect them to have. I was one of the people, I don't think I really publicly talked about it, but I was like, I don't know if I love the running back duo. I don't know if I love the backfield going into the season, but now, I mean, look, they scored 35 points in a game where they focused on the run to an extent. So, Rob, what were your takeaways from the rushing attack?
So obviously there's a lot to like with what we saw yesterday with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. But I'm more content and pleased, I guess, with how Brian Daboll leaned on the run. I mean, too often we've seen them get into these long situations in bad down and distance, and Josh Allen just throws all 3 downs per drive. And we saw that in week 1, and they let the game get away from them, throwing 51 times in a 1-score game. So it was promising to see that they leaned on the run. However, in a shutout, that's what you would expect. And I'm interested to see what Daboll does going forward when it is a closer game. If he starts to trust that Devin Singletary and Zach Moss can pick up the yards that are needed and be effective in pass protection and make the right decisions with the ball, because that is going to be a critical issue if Josh Allen continues to not perform as expected. Not saying that that's going to happen, but you'd like to see a little bit more consistency in the run game. And through 2 weeks, I've liked what I've seen. Devin Singletary has had 2 big runs, one in each of the 2 games. Zach Moss in his first game has 2 touchdowns, just destroying Landon Roberts for a score. So I'm encouraged with what I saw. Obviously, the Dolphins don't have that great of a defense outside of their corners. So I'd like to see more. We'll see more how they utilize those guys next week against a really strong defensive line. But overall, I don't think there's anything to worry about with the running backs right now.
No, there certainly isn't anything to worry about. I mean, I'm over here saying we should be happy for them. We should be proud of the running backs. Again, as you said, obviously the more reliance on the rushing attack was circumstantial. With them getting that lead early and never looking back. Again, that lead coming thanks to Devin Singletary on the second play of the game, or offensive play of the game. But to your point, I do think what we saw from the rushing attack this week will give Daboll confidence moving forward that he can lean on them in tight games where he doesn't have to throw the ball 51 times in a 1-score game or in a game where they're leading into the 4th quarter. He can run the ball. The Bills are able to run the ball. They have Devin Singletary. They have Zach Moss. They have an offensive line that looked solid in run protection yesterday. So I'm pleased with what I saw out of the backfield, and I'm excited to see what it does moving forward. So, Rob, what is your second takeaway from this Buffalo Bills win?
So my second takeaway was that the offensive line bounced back in a big way.
That was a great segue. Great segue.
Particularly John Feliciano. John Feliciano was embarrassed and abused and every other word you can think of for a bad performance last week against Cam Hayward, giving up 8 pressures. I think he had 3 penalties. Yesterday against the Dolphins, he didn't allow a single pressure. He only had 1 penalty, which isn't ideal. But he looked good. On that Zach Moss touchdown, he had a great block, pulling out to the left. I believe it was a pin and pull concept. But yeah, he looked great. Deion Dawkins looked a little bit better too. He only allowed 1 pressure. Darrell Williams was really the only one that struggled from my watching on the broadcast view. I mean, he was so good last year, and obviously going up against TJ Watt, you're going to lose more of those matchups than you're going to win. But against the Dolphins, who don't really have anybody on the edge, they have Emmanuel Ogba, Jalen Phillips, guys like that. He gave up a sack. But overall, I was encouraged with the way that they rebounded, because after last week's performance, they needed a game like they had yesterday. They protected Josh Allen, only allowed 10 pressures overall, which isn't ideal, obviously, but it was a great step in the right direction for an offensive line that really doesn't have a real strong, consistent, quality player outside of Deion Dawkins. So for what it's worth, it was a good performance. However, I'm still very scared of what we're going to see this upcoming week against the football team and the horses that they have on that line with Montez Sweat and Chase Young and Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. So we'll get into that on next week's roundup and see how they fared. But for this week, I'm very encouraged.
All right, we could be proud. Like, one of the things that Josh Allen has gone viral for consistently throughout at least the last 2 seasons is he'll occasionally have these plays where the offensive line just protects him so well that he'll just stand in the pocket and just not move. He'll just stand there and move his head around, and then he'll fire a dart. He'll stand there for like 5 seconds. And again, these are like his controller died moments. They're hilarious. Mm-hmm. He had none of those in week 1. I wouldn't say he had any of those yesterday, but he was closer to having those. I think the protection, there were times when they really bought Allen a fair bit of time in the pocket. Again, they weren't perfect, but they were far better than they were in week 1 when Allen, I feel like, was under pressure. Greg writes, Kyle just said proud without using air. They were implied, Greg. Air quotes are always implied when saying the word proud, unless we're talking about the Proud Family reboot. But yes. What was I talking about? This is why the tangents are a bad idea. This is why allowing the comments to go on the field is a bad idea.
Offensive line, Kyle.
Offensive line. It was good. Yeah, they bounced back. Again, not great, as you said, not perfect. But when you compare it to what they did in week 1, when Allen was under pressure, he was facing Jacoby Brissett against the Bills like pressure all game. It was good to see them bounce back and play this well. And again, got the run game going. I don't know if it's going to hold up next week against that Washington football team defensive line, which if you watched, it was Thursday Night Football, right? This week.
Yep.
Chase Young is just an animal. So is Jonathan. Jonathan Allen. I'm not going to say the hot take, but I could say the hot take of he might be their best pass rusher. How do you feel about that?
It's tough, man. That whole defensive line is amazing.
It is. It's just a crazy defensive line. That's why I drafted them in fantasy. Again, who's smarter, me or Brandon Beane? The people are asking. I don't know if I'm going to play them next week, though. This could be the game where Allen decides, okay, when I could use Josh Allen, 2018 Josh Allen, to stick around for another week, he'll be 2020 Josh Allen. So I might just pick up a different defense because that's my luck. So speaking of defenses, my second takeaway is that this defense is elite. The 2019 Buffalo Bills are back, baby. Elite defense at all and all. Again, held Miami to 0 points, held them to just 216 net yards, 6 sacks, consistent pressure, regardless of who they were playing, had sacks on 2 out of the first 3 plays of the game. Those sacks coming from defensive backs who got off the edge untouched thanks to unique play calling. We'll get to that later. But yes, Jacoby Brissett pressured on 59% of his dropbacks. No quarterback is going to do well with those circumstances, especially not a backup who got little to no first-team reps throughout the week. We said that last week with Josh Allen. Like, no quarterback is going to do well when he's pressured all game. We saw that yesterday with Jacoby Brissett. He made a few nice throws, but Miami was never in the game. Like from even when Tua was in, from the start of the game, they were just overpowered, outmatched. The Bills defense really did come to play. We talked about AJ Epinesa with his 9 pressures just all over the field. You're going to talk about this guy later, I think, in the hot take section. That's a spoiler alert. But Taron Johnson is a star. I need people to not send this to Aaron Quinn because I don't want him to record this and send it to me if I ever say another bad thing about Taron Johnson again. But Taron Johnson is a star. Jordan Poyer said yesterday, best nickelback in the league, which through 2 weeks, he maybe he has been that. Yesterday had 1 sack, 2 run stops, allowed just 50% of the passes thrown at him, had a pass breakup. I also believe he had the forced fumble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a star, just a playmaker. Came up with huge plays consistently. This again after a week 1 where he was just all over the field, was elite. He has strung together 2 incredible games here to the point where Jordan Poyer calling him the best nickelback in the league. Like if he did that before the season, I would have laughed. But now it's like, okay, like I can't argue with it right now. Just speaking more broadly about the Bills defense, 4 fourth down stops, 4 turnover on downs. Which again, if you factor that into the turnover battle, I mean, the Bills won the takeaway battle in spades here, just dominated the turnover differential. If you include the turnover on downs, I think they had 3 actual ones, so 7 if you count it together. And again, just kept Miami out of it in a game where the offense, as I said, sputtered at times. When the offense, for much of the first half, after putting up 14 quick, for much of the rest of the first half, just really struggled to get much of anything going. I think you even tweeted, like at halftime, like this seems like a game where the Bills are just going to lose, but because it's Buffalo, one of those games. But no, the defense didn't allow that to happen. The defense was just stout all the way through, and it really bodes well. We just can't have nice things. We just cannot have a season where the offense clicks on all cylinders and the defense clicks on all cylinders. We had 2 years of great defense. Last year, they took a break and the offense bounced back and was incredible. But this year, it looks like we're not going to have that. It's still early, but we'll see if they can click. But the defense, up until this point, has more than held up, its side of the bargain or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And Joe Marino of Locked On Bills brought up a stat in his podcast this morning saying that 49% of the Dolphins' 70 offensive plays resulted in either a sack, a quarterback hit, a tackle for loss, a pass breakup, or a turnover. And that is insane. For a Bills defense to get those kind of impact plays on every other snap, basically, that's just unheard of. Not only for a Bills defense, but for any defense in this league. And like I said in that tweet, this just felt like one of those games that the Bills were going to lose because we see it year in and year out. They play lights out. The offense gets the early points and then kind of sputters. And then after playing lights out, they can allow a late touchdown or a field goal, which is still not a bad performance at all, but it's just not enough to get the win. But we didn't see that yesterday. They played from start to finish, which is even more impressive given the fact that they're playing down in Miami. Yep. And nearly 100-degree heat and humidity, and they did not let their foot off the gas pedal. Leslie Frazier dialed up a great game, but the secondary was firing on all cylinders. They communicated perfectly. They didn't allow, I think the longest play. I think they had 2 18-yard plays, and those were the longest of the game. I think they had 1 in the run game and 1 in the pass game, and that's it. So really no explosive plays allowed. All the pressures they generated from different looks. Sending Matt Milano on those blitzes with Rousseau dropping into coverage or getting just consistent pressure with the front 4. And then you have the interception by Levi Wallace, the great play by Trey White, just all around from top to bottom. It was an incredible game. And like I think you wrote in our outline, I just saw like what went wrong to even add to our second takeaway. Outside of Josh Allen's inconsistency, there really wasn't. And usually we have a player or two that didn't perform well, and that just wasn't the case yesterday, which is impressive. And if the defense can continue playing near this level throughout the rest of the season, it'll be something special.
I agree. Just firing on all cylinders. And again, part of it was like circumstantial to an extent because
backup quarterback
right. And I mean, they were doing him no favors. Miami's receivers, they had a bunch of drops. Devontae Parker had one in the end zone. Albert Wilson, that's his name, right? He had like 2 drops on the
but this is the type of performance you need when that good teams against that competition they have to do, and that's what's expected of them, and they went above and beyond that, I think. So that's what I'm excited about.
Oh, 100%. I'm very pleased with that defensive performance. Proud of the defensive performance. This would be a great segue into. I have 2 great segues set up here, Rob. I'll throw it to you.
Just throw them both.
So they kind of do overlap a little bit, but I'll let you kick it off here. So, Rob, there were numerous things that went right in this game. Obviously, that's going to happen in any game that finishes 35-0. But for you, what was the thing that went most right?
I have to say, Matt Milano. Matt Milano has been out of his mind through these 2 games, and we knew the type of player that he was, but the nagging injuries have always been an issue. And I think that him being healthy and having the training camp that he did, and now taking it into the regular season, he's playing on another level right now. Just an absolute beast. He's so fast. He's so physical. He does it all. In pass coverage, he's an animal. Gave up 2 catches for only 10 yards on 4 targets. He had 5 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, a quarterback hit, a fumble recovery. Just his entire stat line has got a number across it for every category. He had 7 quarterback pressures yesterday. So rushing the passer, defending the run, dropping into coverage, there's nothing that he can't do. And he's just big. And when he connects with another player, it's another type of hit than any other player on that defense can make. And it stands out. So Matt Milano is really just a beast this year. And that money is looking like
bargain,
even bigger bargain with every snap that he takes. So I think Matt Milano has been just incredible.
I bragged about having 2 segues, and I missed the most obvious one. I should have led with, Rob, I'm going to ask you about Milano. That's a callback. Anyone who was on Bill's Twitter in 2017, that is a callback.
We need John Warrow on the show.
He was going to. I thought he agreed to do a podcast with
you. He did, and it fell through.
We can still do it. John Warrow, I'd love to have you on the show. I doubt he remembers me, but he was a good guy. But all right. So, yes, Matt Milano. That's going to get the Bills fans after me because I said John Warrow is a good guy. Controversial take. John Warrow is a good guy. So with the Matt Milano contract looks like a bargain. Obviously, he was just all over the place. Who was the color commentator yesterday? That Matt Millen.
Awful.
Look, I don't listen to the broadcast closely enough to have an opinion on any commentator. Really, I just watch the game. I get my commentator opinions from Alan Pergamont, Buffalo News TV critic, and my former professor. So I just read what he writes about the commentators, and if he likes them, I'm like, okay, they're probably good. He didn't like Matt Millen, I don't think, all that much, and nobody did. But I did catch one of his things. It was after Matt Milano had like most of the stats that you're talking about. The sack, just consistent in every facet of the game, was just electric. He just goes, who's had a good game? Milano. Thank you. Thank you for that analysis.
Yeah.
But again, Matt Milano all over the place. And this came as a result, at least due in part to the defensive play calling, which for me is is what went right in this game. I think we've alluded to it, but Leslie Frazier was very aggressive in this play call, or in his play calling this game. Micah Hyde even talked about it, or Sean McDermott talked about it after the game. Sean McDermott saying they were aggressive. Micah Hyde saying they were aggressive. Micah Hyde that he came off the field a number of times and just came over and gave Frazier a high five. It was just like, you're doing a hell of a job. You're calling a hell of a game. And he did. Again, when you get 6 sacks in a game, that obviously is due in part to just being overpowering on the defensive line and in other facets of the game, but also due to strong play calling, opportunistic play calling. And Frazier called exotic and unorthodox pass rush, I guess, setups or plays. He did blitz occasionally, again, sending those defensive backs off the line of scrimmage, off the edge, or early in the game, resulting in 2 sacks on the first game from first 3 plays from Taron Johnson and Micah Hyde. But as you were talking about, Rob, just more unorthodox blitzes, not even blitzes later in the game, because they were still 4-man rushes. They were just unique 4-man rushes with getting Milano and whoever else after the quarterback and dropping defensive ends, whether it be Rousseau, Jerry Hughes, whoever, back into coverage. So you still have a 4-man rush, but you're not overmatched, or you're not in a numbers disadvantage in terms of coverage. So with Rousseau and Hughes back in coverage, it got exposed a couple times, but for the most part, it just created unique situations, and situations that Miami didn't expect, that Tua probably wouldn't have expected, and Jacoby Brissett, probably didn't prepare for it either. So again, just getting pressure in unique ways, and the pressure was there all day. Again, getting Brissett under pressure on 59% of his dropbacks, that's just incredible. So again, aggressive play calling game from Leslie Frazier. Everyone loved it. Everyone's talking about it. It worked.
Yeah, and dropping Rousseau into coverage is something that I think we'll see. Obviously, for a couple snaps a game, you don't want Rousseau dropping into coverage a lot.
Right.
But when you have a guy that's
linebacker,
when you have a guy that's 6'6", 6'7", with like an 80-something inch wingspan, that really clogs the vision of a quarterback that's under pressure, because he's getting a blitz or not a blitz, but a rush from an unexpected player. So these little wrinkles, I think Leslie Frazier is going to be able to have a lot of fun with, now that he has some unique personnel throughout the defensive line. He's got linebackers that can cover a lot of ground if need be, and play man coverage and zone coverage. But overall, Frazier called a great game. He was more aggressive than he's ever been, I think, and that's noted by Micah Hyde having his first sack as a Bill. So he's rushing the pack. Yeah, I didn't think that was true, but it was. So 5 years with the team, he gets his first sack. So you see, you're blitzing the safeties, you're blitzing Taron Johnson, dropping Rousseau into coverage, and it's all working. The pressure was always getting home. So that was very encouraging to see.
It was. And one of my complaints about the defense for the last couple of years, and I think it's a complaint that a lot of people have had, is that it's just vanilla at times. Like, it's never really fun. Like, at times they come up with big plays, but for the most part, it's just kind of, run of the mill defense. But yesterday, it was great. The pressure they were getting, the unique ways they were creating it, I'm just reiterating here, but I didn't expect it out of Frazier. And I think Eric tweeted that they've done similar things with Milano before, in terms of, rushing him and getting a guy back in coverage. But like, Milano really was the benefactor, I think. As you brought it up, Milano was the benefactor of this aggressive play calling, because it really allowed him to showcase everything he can do. And he did everything. Like, again, that contract is starting to look more and more like a bargain if he can stay healthy. So is there anything else before we get into the fun part that's going to make everyone turn on us?
I think we need a disclaimer that before we get into this, I would like everyone to know I am making this statement now, that I think Josh Allen is an amazing quarterback.
Amazing person. Amazing guy.
Quarterback, pistachio lover. Anything you want to talk about Josh Allen, I am all in favor. Big fan.
Okay, so Rob, we discussed before before going live, what else could we talk about for the what went wrong section? And I think we landed on, really the only thing we can talk about is Josh Allen, because that's really the only thing out of this game where I'm not like, oh yeah, it was good. Like, the defense, I'm like, it was stellar. Defensive line was great. Matt Milano was great. Secondary was great. Offensive line was fine. Running game was good. I talk about Josh Allen, and I'm like, it could have been better. Could have been worse. Could have been a lot better. 17 of 33 for 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. 76 of those passing yards came off of 2 passes, one of which was a beautiful dime to Emmanuel Sanders, the other of which was a not-so-beautiful dime to Stephon Diggs. The ball got there, but Stephon Diggs made the play over Xavier Howard, but the ball still had to get there. I'll give him that. But there are just certain things about Allen through these first 2 weeks that we need to discuss. People were saying that he was better this week than he was last week. I don't agree with that because we talk about, the offensive line being better this week. I didn't give him a pass last week, but I said I'd like to see what he can do with at least competent protection, with better protection. And he had that to an extent this week, and 17 of 33 for 179 is what we see with that. So, Rob, before I go any further, what were your thoughts on Josh Allen from this week?
Obviously, it's not the Josh Allen we were expecting to see going into the season, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. And anybody that is telling you differently, I believe, is just being naive. When you have the season that he had last year, and then you sign that huge contract, there are expectations of how he's going to play. It wasn't enough in week 1. And yesterday, thanks to a running game and a defense, it was enough to win 35-0. And this isn't saying that Allen isn't going to get things back, get back to where he was last year, because I think that he will. However, it's very discouraging to see his struggles early on this season. And you can blame it on the pass rush. You can blame it on the Steelers. You can blame it on the coverage of the Dolphins. But at the end of the day, Allen has not been able to get into a rhythm. He's made the big plays, the big splash plays that you need to see from him, which are very impressive. But it's the routine throws that he's missing. And under pressure, he's been terrible. He was pressured on 14 dropbacks yesterday. He completed 3 of 12 passes for 19 yards. That is not the Josh Allen that we're used to seeing. On deep passes, he was 2 of 6. Obviously, he connected on that deep one to Sanders. But now for the season, he's 3 of 13 on those passes over 20 yards. And that was where he thrived last year, those big explosive plays. So it's very discouraging to see. But I do think that Brian Dable and Josh Allen will figure things out, because going into this season, a lot of people were talking about regression being expected, maybe statistically, but a lot of people weren't talking about the regression that we'd see based on how defenses attack him. And that's what I think we're seeing now. Against the Steelers, it was a lot of just the coverage. They were able to drop 7 or 8 in coverage and just bracket Diggs all game. But yesterday against the Dolphins, a lot of man coverage. Xavier Howard pretty much followed Diggs around, and that was a matchup that I think was extremely fun to watch. And Diggs won his share as Howard did his. But Allen was just not able to get into a rhythm again against a pretty weak pass rush. And he wasn't able to find his second, third options, which are talented players consistently. So I think going forward, it's something that's concerning. And I believe that if this keeps up for another two games, then it's going to be a problem. But right now, I think it's just a healthy concern to have.
I will co-sign that. Yes, I'm not ready to hit the panic button. I don't even have the panic button on the desk yet. The hand's not hovering over it or anything. But the panic button is in the Amazon cart, if that makes sense. Like, there's definitely cause for concern with what we've seen. Just little things. Like, let's first talk about the positives of yesterday. The Sanders pass was beautiful. The 30 whatever yard, beautiful pass. The Diggs touchdown was great. That's just patented Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs shenanigans. Beautiful stuff. With Diggs, of course, falling, Xavier Howard losing a shoe, and then Diggs coming back over the middle of the field and being wide open for a touchdown. The Dawson Knox throw for the throw to Dawson Knox for a touchdown was good. And the interception, I don't want to give Josh a pass because the ball was behind Diggs, but that was Xavier Howard. Like, that's just one of the best corners in the game making a play. Much like how later in the game, Stephon Diggs, one of the best receivers in the game, making a play on that deep ball. But there were just throws that he made last year that he's just not making this year. It just, and it's, again, not hitting the panic button, not saying I'm overly concerned, but this is 2 weeks in a row now where he's been underwhelming, and they just paid him $250 million. The contract obviously hasn't kicked in yet, but they agreed to pay him $250 million. And what we're seeing through 2 games is, a quarterback who needs circumstances in order to succeed. You can say that's every quarterback. Every quarterback needs, proper circumstances in order to succeed, favorable circumstances. But I mean, Victoria Saley tweeted something about this yesterday, host of the Tuck Rule, good podcast. But it's something like, if your $250 million quarterback needs perfect circumstances in order to succeed, that's not very good. I don't think Josh Allen needs perfect circumstances in order to succeed, but I mean, he's had he had better protection yesterday, and he just was missing on throws. So I don't know what else to say about Josh Allen. It's just something to monitor, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's 2 throws specifically that come to mind as the yikes throws, and they're really the same pass. So last week there was the intermediate crossing route to Diggs that he really underthrew. It was almost picked off, and maybe it was, I forget, but he really underthrew it, and it would have been a huge gain. And then yesterday was a similar pass to Sanders on a deep crosser from the slot, and he underthrew that as well, and it was incomplete. And those passes, for a guy who emphasized how much he worked on the crossing routes over the offseason, it was concerning. And those are throws that he needs to hit, because the receivers were pretty much open, and it was just the touch and the velocity on the ball that wasn't there. So those were very bad throws to me. But these are things that I think that he will clean up. But there's something going on where it seems like he's maybe it's the pressure, the jitters that even he admitted that he was dealing with in week 1. But like you said, when you're making $250 million or set to make $250 million, you don't get these excuses that you had a year or 2 ago when it's, the defense can carry him and Josh just needs to do enough and not turn the ball over and make a big play or 2. No, you are now the guy. And whether Bills fans want to admit it or not to themselves, this is what comes with the superstar quarterback, is these expectations. And if he doesn't meet them, it's going to be a problem.
Randy Lavancia writes, highest paid secondary last week plus Pitt's secondary is Snap. Geez, no wonder why he struggled a bit. Again, everything is circumstantial. Mm-hmm. But yes, Miami has a good secondary, highest paid secondary. They have arguably the best corner in the league in Xavier Howard. Stephon Diggs said he's the best corner in the league. But and the coverage was sticky throughout the day. They had good coverage. But as you said, Rob, there were plays where the receivers were open. Allen just didn't make the throw. Mm-hmm. We have Fick Noti writes, Kyle, this is the People's Podcast. The people not saying anything. Have you read the comments? The people are going crazy for the People's Podcast. The people are loving this podcast. So does that wrap up Josh Allen talk? We're again not hitting the panic button. I think you've said it a few times, but I also think he will improve. I mean, Josh Allen is too talented of a player to keep this up consistently. We've seen enough from Josh Allen to know this is not the player that he is, and I do think he'll bounce back. But if this continues, if Washington gets how many weeks in a row are we going to make excuses, I guess? If Washington gets pressure next week consistently, which they might do because it's a very good defensive line, are we going to get on here and say, he was pressured, let's give it another week? And against Houston, what is Houston going to do? If Allen struggles against Houston, what are we going to say? Just it's, it was too sunny, or what? I don't know how long. I hope we don't have to get to that point, I guess is what I'm saying. I hope that he bounces back before we have to start making excuses for him every week, which I think he will. I think, again, he's too talented of a player to not. So I think that wraps up what went right.
We've seen what Allen can do. We know he's an MVP caliber quarterback. He just hasn't played like that yet. And like we said, that's okay. It's the beginning of the season. They played great players on defense. And I think that he will get it together. But obviously we're nitpicking a 35-0 loss, but it's concerning and it's something that you have to talk about. So we can move on from there.
Did you see that Tyrod Taylor got hurt, unfortunately?
I did, after he was like 10 of 11.
He was balling.
Yeah.
But we were supposed to get Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tyrod Taylor in back-to-back weeks. We're not getting either of them. We're getting Taylor Heineke and Davis Mills.
That's
no
about
excuses.
all I got on them.
Next man up. But if it's not, if the Bills do not do well against these teams, maybe I'll order that panic button. Okay. So, do you want to do a little WFT preview, just short?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, Rob, this week, not just any football team is coming into town. The football team is coming into town, led by Taylor Heineke, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson. Just a fun offense. Antonio Gibson didn't have a great week last week, but Terry McLaurin did. And again, that defense is just at times overpowering. A very young, very strong defensive line that's going to be fun. It's fun this year. It's going to be fun 5 years from now. So just any overarching concerns that you have about this game entering it?
Obviously, the defensive line. You got a great defensive tackle and a great edge rusher, which is what the Steelers had. So obviously that's concerning. Jonathan Allen against John Feliciano and Chase Young against Darrell Williams is not really exciting. However, I do think there's matchups in the secondary that Josh Allen can take advantage of. I don't think their corners are that spectacular. On offense, I'm interested to see how the Bills attack them, though, because like you said, they have great skill players with Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson. But then again, it's Taylor Heineke. He's like that gamer quarterback that just seems to pull him out. But I think this is an offense that the Bills should be able to handle. And when they're on offense, there's great matchups all over the field. And so the Bills are just going to have to win theirs because Washington's going to get home a lot. Like there's just no getting around that. So seeing how they respond offensively and decide to attack them is going to be really fun to see.
It is going to be very fun. Again, for game purposes, would not have rather have seen Ryan Fitzpatrick, but as a person, as a football fan, I would rather see Ryan Fitzpatrick. But like you said, Taylor Heineke just somehow manages to pull him out. Somehow has a rabbit's foot or whatever, just gets it done. I don't think that'll happen this week. Look, the Bills, if we're being this critical after a 35-0 win over a strong divisional opponent, imagine if the Bills don't win the next two games by combined scores of 120. But no, these are two upcoming winnable games for the Bills. Washington football team are a good team, but I don't think they're a team with fun pieces right now. I don't think they're a necessarily strong Super Bowl contending team, whereas the Bills hypothetically are. So I'm not looking past them or the Texans, but I'm kind of looking past them. Like they should win. The Bills should win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're moving into everyone's second favorite segment. It's the hot take segment, the segment where I make good hot takes and Rob critiques them and tears them down for no reason. So, Rob, I kind of alluded to this earlier. Your hot take was surrounding one Taron Johnson. So I'll let you go. What's your hot take?
So I think Taron Johnson will be a Pro Bowl player this season if he keeps it up how he's been playing. Just he is all over the field, rushing the passer, dropping into coverage, defending the run, much like Matt Milano. They've got just a stud lining up in the slot, and that's such a hard position to play. There's not a lot of great ones in the NFL, but Taron Johnson looks to be one of them so far. Just the impact plays that he's making, the big pass breakups, the sacks, the interceptions that are sure to come, the forced fumbles. These are plays that you need to make the Pro Bowl. And so far through two games, he's starting to accumulate those.
Rob, this is the first time that I can say you have a lukewarm take.
Mm-hmm.
Your take is that the best nickelback in the league is going to make the Pro Bowl? It's a headline grabber. No, I agree. Like if he keeps this up again, I think I gave Taron Johnson his flowers earlier in the show. He has been incredible, and if he keeps it up as he has through these first 2 weeks, again, the consistent play along with those big plays that he comes up with, seemingly 2 or 3 a game, yeah, he'll have no reason not to make the Pro Bowl. Maybe even all-pro status. I don't know. People are talking. Earl Scott writes, with respect, guys, the Giants scored 30 points on that defense. He gives respect to us, but he doesn't give respect to Danny Dimes. What are you doing, Earl? You got to respect Danny Dimes, elite player. My hot take, it's see, I don't know. My judgment of what a hot take is so skewed at this point because I've been coming out with heat and then everyone's like, oh, that sucks. Not a hot take. I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what a hot take is then. So my hot take is that Greg Rousseau leads the Buffalo Bills in sacks this year with double digits. Could be 10, could be 99, but it's going to be double digits by the end of the season, and he will lead the team. And they're all going to be cleanup sacks, and the nerds are going to tell you that none of them count, and he's not good when he has 18 sacks, and he's among the league leaders in sacks. They're going to be like, actually, he's not good. So that'll be fun. But, yes, he's going to lead the team in sacks. Was that a hot enough take or no?
I think that's hot. A rookie getting double-digit sacks doesn't happen that often, so I think it's a good hot take, but I think it's realistic.
That's what I love to see. That's what I love to hear. Lukewarm, Jason M. writes. Roman writes, lame take, Kyle. Hot take is triple digits. He's right. He is right.
Only 98 away, so only 98 away. It's got a long season ahead of us.
He's on pace. He just needs to play oh, wait. Did you see Zach Wilson yesterday?
I did.
It was a fun game. It was a fun recap to watch. And they weren't even like good interceptions. Like there were 2 that I was like, okay, that's not bad. And then there were other 2 where it was like, oh, geez, not good. He'll bounce back though, right?
I think so. No, this year is not going to be his year.
We have faith in Zach. This is a Zach Wilson. This isn't a Zach Wilson podcast.
Not at all.
The anti-Zach Wilson podcast, pro John Worrow. So I think that wraps up this week's Miami Dolphins recap. Anything else before we get out of here?
I think that covers it.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to say Josh Allen will be all right.
Lone Wolf writes, Kyle, a hot take would be Levi makes the Pro Bowl. Am I allowed to just lie in the hot take segment? Is that?
I think we need to start just lying because they're not hot enough.
If I could just lie, I will do that. I will say Mitch Trubisky makes the Pro Bowl, which he has before. So I can make an argument like there's precedent for him making the Pro Bowl. If that's what you guys want, let me know. I can heat him up, but I can come up with some good ones if you want. Good ones. All right. So thank you guys for listening / watching. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel and follow Cover One on Twitter at Cover One. Like us on Facebook. Follow all the wonderful Cover One writers. Watch all the wonderful Cover One shows. Make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, that is promo code Cover One. Make sure to follow Rob on Twitter at
Rob Quinn 619.
You can follow me on. Actually, don't follow me on Twitter. I'm deactivating. It's on the screen actually. Again, thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.